And good Thursday morning, everybody. You are listening to Liberty Collaborative, and I am one of the hosts here, Aaron Bowman. And with me, as always, is K. Carl Smith, Chris Coyle, and Mike Hancock. Thank you for spending your Thursday morning with us. And today we are going to be talking from bondage to liberty versus liberty to bondage. So, welcome, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Greetings all.
All right. So this is going to be a fun episode today because we are going to be looking at the difference between Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. And this is all because K. Carl Smith here, if you who are watching don't know this or listening, he's a really good author. He's written a few books. So we're going to talk about his book that he's getting ready to release pretty soon. So K. Carl, I'll give the floor to you.
Well, thank you so much. And again, greetings from the great state of Alabama, guys. Roll Tide. And thank you for this opportunity to have this platform to talk about the third book I just finished writing. Well, I guess a few more changes to it. It's entitled Douglass versus Marx, The Battle for America's Soul. And I know y'all got a lot of questions to ask me, so let me just say this. In this book, I wrote it because many people, especially young people, are being attacked and indoctrinated into Marxism, but they never heard the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. So in this book, what I wanted to do, I want to make the choices clear. So I did a contrast, if you will, of Douglass versus Marx regarding various core liberty values, what each of them said about the U.S. Constitution, free speech, religious liberty, the right to bear arms. Um, the three-fifth clause is important as well. So thank God we have what they said about these things, and we put them in a contrast. And matter of fact, to my understanding, this is the first and only book ever written that has a direct contrast of the liberty message of Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx ideologies. And I wrote this thing at
Wow.
a grade level where we can take middle schoolers and on up, and they can see and understand why liberty is important based on looking it through Douglas's lens.
Hey,
That's fantastic.
yeah, K. Carl, I saw you like for the first time 2.5 years ago, and you gave that presentation. And I was sitting there in the audience, I said, "Brilliant! This is absolutely amazing." So, what I'd like to know, and I don't know if I've ever asked you this, what actually was the inspiration? When did that aha moment come to you that said, I can make that distinction and really get the point across?
That contrast, yeah.
Yeah, that's a that's a good question because when you ask that question, I'm thinking about not about in terms of what inspired me to write this book, but what turned me to Frederick Douglass to begin with. Is just, and I didn't know much about this man growing up at all, based on my knowledge of Douglas, based on my own individual reading. So it was a quote, Mike, when I read a quote, and I never knew this. Douglas said on one occasion, "I'm a Republican, a black Donald Republican." I said, "Wait a minute, Douglas was a Republican? Douglas was an Uncle Tom too?" So, but that quote sent me on a quest where I said, let me read about this guy. And more I read about this guy, I realized he really was a liberty philosopher. So
Yeah.
that got me involved into reading the things he had to say. He wrote extensively. So that quote right there really whet my appetite because I was I did not know some things that I wasn't taught some things that I was kind of indoctrinated in when I was in college, specifically the three-fifth clause and what Douglas said about it versus what I was taught.
Mm.
Can you elaborate on that? You want to do that now, okay, Carl? The three-fifths clause.
If you want me to, Chris. So what I did, I sent you all the manuscript of my book, asked you to check it out. But since then, I've been doing some thinking and writing. I really want to make this book where it is clear. It's a contrast of Douglas and Marx. So I don't know if I'm gonna put it in before every chapter, but we'll just have a one chapter. But remember, Chris, in the Columbian Orator, the book that Douglas bought, and the dialogue that exists between the slave and the slave master, which was fictitious. So I came up with seven uh, fictitious stories of Douglas and Karl Marx having a conversation. And one of those conversations was about the Constitution and the 3/5 clause. So let me just read you what I wrote late last night. So imagine Douglas and Karl Marx, they're in the room, and sitting on a table is a copy of the U.S. Constitution. Here's Marx. Here it is, plain for all to see. Your American Constitution is a fraud. It counted your people as 3/5 of a man. Tell me, Mr. Douglas, how can you defend such a vile document? Douglas, let's read this carefully. At first, I believe, as many others told me, that the 3/5 clause declared that black men was 3/5 of a human being. But when I read it for myself, I saw it differently. It was a compromise designed to limit the political power of the slaveholding states. If the South had allowed to count every enslaved person as a full citizenship for representation, their chains would have been locked tighter still. The 3/5 clause reduced their power. Marx, compromise with evil is still evil. The workers of the world need revolution, not parchment filled with half promises. Douglas, I don't deny the evil of slavery. I felt it on my back, in the blood on the ground, but I also saw the genius of this Constitution. It gives us principles, liberty, justice, equality, even if America had not lived up to them. That is why I say I'm not a revolutionary. I'm a reformer. Revolution destroys, reformer redeems. Revolution did not free me. It was the Constitution, when applied fairly, that opened the path to my liberty. Marx, principles. The principles I see is hypocrisy. Rich white men wrote freedom for himself, but chains for you. Douglas, you're wrong. The Constitution, if read rightly, is a freedom document. Nowhere does it say a man may be held as property. Nowhere does it declare slavery holy. The 3/5 clause, it was a dagger pointed at the heart of slave power. I wore those slavery scars. I see no hypocrisy, but hope. Almost done, guys.
Wow.
Marx.
No, it's good.
Marx, you hope too much, Mr. Douglas. Only tearing down the older can the oppressed be free. Liberty is not born from compromise, but from revolution. Douglas, and yet and yet your revolution bathed nations in blood, leaving them no freer than before. Your theories in Europe, writing of chains you never wore. I live the reality of slavery, and I tell you, reform through liberty is stronger than destruction through violence.
Mm.
Marx, so you cling to a system that betrayed you. Why not cast it aside? Douglas, because I know what it gave me: free speech, to right to bear arms, a chance to earn, to prosper, to stand as a man responsible for himself. I know also that my God rules over the affairs of men, and his providence raised up a nation where liberty can grow, even slowly. I would rather reform such a nation than burn it to the ground and start with ashes. Marx, you put faith in God and in a document. I put faith in the masses rising up. Douglas, and therein lies our difference. You trust theory, I trust truth, experience, and the Almighty God. I walk the path from slavery to freedom, and I tell you, liberty can be reformed into fullness, but tyranny only multiplies in revolution. So there's like 7 dialogues that this flavor of Douglas and Karl Marx going at it. And I had my 14-year-old son to read it. He's understanding the importance of liberty now.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
you
what
could
the
do a
book's
whole
all
Telling a
book
about.
just on
story,
that.
K. Carl, is brilliant. You know, where you do that. Michael, you remember, and Aaron, if you had seen this, I too saw K. Carl's presentation the first time on December 2nd, 2022. And my jaw dropped because I was struggling with how to describe what we believe in a way that many people, not far right people, but the unaffiliated, even the software that could understand. And K. Karl was the first person to stand there, explain it. But when he got to a slide that compared Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass and summarized the fact they were born on the same year, one into abject poverty and slavery, the other into white privilege in Germany, it only gets better from there. Wow. But K. Karl, a question for you, and sort of Michael and Aaron, please tag along with this question. But you said something about theory, which is sort of interesting. So at its sort of base element, you have one theory born out of Germany and coffee houses and people who really didn't work, a society that had really bifurcated into the proletariat, the owners of means of production, and sort of a large lower class, and struggles because there wasn't a framework or a system. They had been stammering and struggling to evolve from monarchies, right? Here you had the US that they left monarchies, got to these shores, and said, we have to have a theory of operation. And their theory of operation was giving the power to the people. Whereas his theory, coming up the theory into reality, was these people are going to strike and take from the proletariat the means of production. But here's the thing I just love to hear you chat about. In his theory, it was that there's some authoritative, benevolent, I suppose, it never worked that way in history. Everyone using communism today is a dictator.
Yep.
That's right.
But this theory gave the power to the people. And so from theoretical basis, I believe our system was divine in its brilliance and God ordained, if you will, because it gives individual freedom and power. Whereas his, from the very start, was rotten because it assumed things about the human experience that aren't true.
Totally agree. Michael, you want to go ahead and comment first?
Well, yeah, sort of tagging on to that is, as I've studied Marx, since I was in high school, 1972, before I graduated. One of the last things that I did was give a presentation on the Bolshevik Revolution. So that's when I got into this stuff. And over the years, I've never really understood how Karl Marx, a person who wrote about the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, actually was supported by a person, Frederick Engels, in the bourgeoisie pretty much his entire life, and actually never was part of the proletariat, how he could design some great theory, right, that we're all supposed to just bow down to and follow to make things better. Karl Marx's life is like, if you actually really study the results, the fruit of his efforts, he was a disaster.
He was a loser. And this is a setup, man. And I let people know I didn't tell y'all what to ask me. Y'all just asked me questions. And but this is it's a divinely fit what I have printed off to share with you. So I wrote a dialogue titled Douglass versus Marx, Experience versus Theory. I'm not going to read the whole dialogue to you. I'm going to cover the first couple of exchanges. So Marx, here's Marx talking. I have written at length about the struggle of the oppressed. My books explains the laws of history, the class struggle, and the coming revolution. I understand the plight of the poor because I studied it deeply. Douglass, you studied it, sir. I lived it. You wrote about oppression from the comfort of your desk. I wore its chains on my wrists and felt the whip on my back. Marx, knowledge comes through analysis, Mr. Douglass. I don't need chains on my hands to understand slavery or poverty. Science and reason are enough to show me the path forward. Douglass, reason without experience can be blind. You speak of slavery like it's an idea. I speak of slavery like it's reality. I watched mothers torn from their children, families ripped apart, men worked to death under the sun. You talk of theory. I talk of scars that still burn my flesh.
Wow.
Powerful.
That is, you could do a whole book, K. Karl, on just those dialogues going back and forth. I think would be super powerful. But before we go any further, I just want to say, everybody that's watching online or listening, if you want to join in the conversation, if you have a question yourself you'd like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat on YouTube, it'll pop up. We'll see it on our end. If you are on X and you're watching, just leave a comment. I'm monitoring that too, and we'll bring that into the chat. And
Aaron, okay, Karl, can people pre-order this book from you?
You're muted.
Yeah, there's a link. I can put the link in the chat. I guess, Aaron, the best way of doing that. And you can share
and I can put it in the show notes after we're done.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right quick.
Oh, that'd be great. Talk about, and sorry, Aaron, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Just timing, you guys, is so amazing, because talk about theory and reality. Communism in the United States has sort of always been a theoretical threat. There's always this social democrats out there somewhere, Green Party, got 0.01% of vote. Look at it today.
Yeah.
With Mondami in New York City, and with this growing power of this movement, AOC, Bernie Sanders, I mean, they are literally shifting all the way to the left and embracing this. I think poll I just read, guys, New York City, the governor endorsed this guy, but apparently the polls are starting to shift against them. But okay, Karl, the timing couldn't be better for this discussion in our country.
I agree with that, and God works in mysterious ways, and especially when you consider how Marxism is doing more than just creeping into our school system. It is there, and it's coming after our children, and who've never heard the counter message of liberty. And I think I shared this with you all before. I was looking at a video of Thomas Sowell, and before Thomas Sowell became the great conservative thinker he is now, he was a devout Marxist. He said that in his own words. And people ask him, okay, what was the light that came on that helped you see differently? He said, I finally heard the counter argument. And that's what this book is all about, is to share with people the counter argument, because they're not getting Douglass. They're not teaching the liberty message of Douglass. And it's important to see the aspect of liberty from the lens of a former slave. That's powerful. And Marxism has no answer for that.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that happened to me a couple of years ago, a buddy and I went to school to work on some stuff, and we ended up talking to one of the instructors there. And the words that came out of this instructor's mouth actually shocked me. Those words were, well, why don't we just try communism? I'm saying, my goodness, this person doesn't have a clue as to what he's talking about. If you take a look at communism emerging out of Russia into China and all over the world, what we see is just massive destruction. Millions and millions, almost up to 100 million people killed over the years as a result of embracing that ideology and forcing it down the throats of its people.
You all like this. I don't have it written out yet, but one of the things I'm going to put in the book, I'm going to send Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass on a time travel. They're going to come to the 2025. They're going to come to the United States, and they're going to go to Cuba. And so they can talk about that, and they'll go back and forth on that.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, and I got to say, going back to when you all were talking about the slides and the comparison of Frederick and Marx, that is probably one of the most powerful slides I've seen in a very long time, because normally it's death by PowerPoint and stuff like that in the military, and seeing something like that where it's right there, it gives me a lot of talking points as a Frederick Douglass Republican. Now, when I go into the lines, then, so to speak, and I bring this stuff up and I do the comparison, and it's very helpful. And I think this book is going to be great just because of the dialogue you have going back and forth. Really puts it into a more easier, realistic consumption, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And one thing about the book, it is not political whatsoever. It's all about history, political science. So now we won't have to worry about, well, we probably got to worry. It's still going to be a fight because the left's not going to like it. But I think we'll have a much easier time to get this book in the hand in our students in the public school system who's receiving this indoctrination, because there's nothing political about it.
Right.
Well, it strikes me, K. Karl, I've told you this before. They need to get you on news shows in New York City, national shows, because you're the only person I know of in the United States that can really help people understand the historical roots of this and the fundamental that you're talking about here. So if you think about, again, Mondami, one of the biggest well-known cities, it's called the Big Apple for a reason. It's sort of the most cosmopolitan city, if you read about it, has got a socialist who's really, okay, Karl, you correct me a second here. I think the word socialism is just a nice branding of communism.
Absolutely.
Just a step.
100%.
But here this guy is saying, we're going to take money from some people, we know who that is, and we're going to redistribute it in all sorts of ways run by the government. So he's clearly, if not seizing the very means of production, he's seizing the fruits of private production. So people leave. But having someone like you, Aaron, Michael, I have heard no one debating the fundamental core philosophy of Mondami or AOC or Bernie at this level ever.
No, typically what ends up happening is that people simply go the personality route, right? They go and they just tear down people's personalities, and which is all a technique used to keep people from actually discussing the issues.
Or promote how slick he is. Look, this guy went to Bowdoin. He's got great social media. Aaron, they keep promoting that he's a slick salesman.
Right. Yeah, and he is everywhere. He's on social media all day long. I don't know how he gets anything done. And, we have our own good old Chris Murphy here who's trying to kind of take the same playbook, always online ranting and raving about something and, stoking that political fire. But I would like to see somebody challenge him with the Frederick Douglass Republican messaging, because as we saw just in that exchange between Marx and Frederick, it's a clearly different aspect of what one thinks Marxism is versus what liberty actually is, from a man who writes, fantastically about it. And it's not, like you said, K. Karl, it's not a political thing. It's not a right or left. It's right. Values, and it's what the founders wrote in our documents, that liberty message, and having that courage, that virtue to be able to stand up for your values and your beliefs. And you don't see that with the Marxist side. So
Aaron, let's challenge that. I want to give you, K. Karl, a setup here of how you would apply Marx and Douglass to the following. So someone's listening to us and they go, well, this is nice theory and history, but I'm here in Connecticut and I'm in the middle of what's called affordable housing crisis. And I think that the government giving us more, being fair, is the fair way, because I'm entitled, and there's a book out called Second Class that they use the term retirement with dignity. I should be able to own a home that I can afford. All these are nice notions. But Aaron, in our state of Connecticut, when one looks into it, and K. Karl, here's the setup, what one finds is the government is the problem. So, for example, you know how many homeless what's it called now, Aaron? Unhoused?
The unhoused.
Unhomed? About 3,500 in Connecticut. So keep that number in mind. Guess how many illegal immigrants, not legal, illegal immigrants in Connecticut?
How many?
About 167,000. 167,000 illegal immigrants. Well, they're staying somewhere in housing, probably paid for by the government, paid by tax. Here's the killer. How much do you think our state of Connecticut, one of the smallest ones in the country, spent on legal immigrants last year? $1.3 billion.
That's a lot.
So what you see is government steering the means of production, tax money, into political avenues and ideology. It's counter, K. Karl, I believe, to everything Frederick Douglass stood for. An example where if you gave that person liberty and took all that away and stopped taxing them with the most expensive electricity in the country, people could actually afford a home.
I agree. And one thing about Frederick Douglass is such a nightmare for Marxists and for the left, because all the claims that Marxists make, how you got to have government to come in to be not just a referee, but they even write the plays, the playbook. And you got to have government to help people out because things are so expensive. They're disadvantaged and the system is rigged. Well, how you explain Douglas rising to becoming a 1%er? Starting as a slave. Now, everybody's not going to become a 1%er, but the point is liberty is the transforming agent here. That's the game changer. Give people liberty, and when you give them liberty, of course, in the book you're gonna read, I never use the word rights. Freedom and liberty without putting the word responsibility behind it. Well, what a lot of people are saying, I have my right. I want to have a right to free education. You got the right to it, but you got the responsibility to get off your butt and go to class.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. So that's important. It's all about liberty. And Douglass is a game changer. He wrote that extensively, and Marxists have no answer for that. That's why you don't see Douglass in school like you see how Marx has creeped in, because it's totally opposite what they're trying to advocate, what they're advocating and push on our children.
Yeah, that's a good point, because even a lot of the founders always talked about having responsibility. Like, you can have your liberties, your freedoms, but that comes with responsibility. And Chris, to your point, when you're talking about the homeless and all the illegal immigrants, it's typical government. They want people to be dependent on government, just like that story you told us, Karl, about the kid who wants to be on disability for a job, right? Like, they just want that dependency, and that's not going to work. People need to be able to have their own personal responsibility to go out and make their own way. Nothing's guaranteed. You just have to work for it.
Yeah, you know, when you mentioned that whole dependency thing, I have to look back at Karl Marx's life. And he was dependent on others his entire life. And then he designed a system that basically is one that makes everyone, the vast majority of people, dependent on the government for their for their well-being, except that what ends up happening is their being isn't so well at the end of the day.
Right.
I think Karl Marx was really upset with his friends, because his wife came from a business family. I think, I'm just being a little cynical here, that he wrote the Communist Manifesto because he couldn't get after their money. He couldn't get their money.
Hey, Karl,
He said, okay, if I can't get their money, doggone it, we got to fix this. I want my uncle's money.
Okay, Karl, it's actually better than that historically. He gets kicked out of Germany, so he goes to the UK because he's basically fulminating riots, and he's a journalist. We know how popular they are in our country. Media is right. He's a journalist. So this true story here, he is told, hey, you got to write this thing. So he's got his friend helping him write it, and they put him on a deadline. And from what I read and understand, he it's like a term paper error, and he goes, oh, geez, I got to get this finished. So he's just throwing a lot of shit. Now contrast that with these guys coming to the United States and Franklin and Jefferson ordering all these books back to the Bible, Greek, Roman law, looking at the arc of history and law, and evolving up a group of scholars, and then questioning it, saying what systems of government will work. So you had a collective group reflecting on history versus one guy in a coffee house and now in London with a deadline to get something written. And even at that foundational sense, it's really Marx is a joke in terms of what he wrote versus the Constitution of what Douglass heralded. But here's the thing, I'll throw it back to you guys, that kills me. I think this guy was sort of the scam artist who wrote this thing, and some guy named, was it Lenin, goes, good. Now I know a facade for being a dictator. In the old days before this, he was just a king, right? A monarch, another Napoleon. I'm going to kill everyone and seize power. But now with a Communist Manifesto, he said, I know, I like that communist thing. They weren't communists. He killed everyone. Right? And then Mao Zedong, same thing. In North Korea, they're not communists. They're dictators.
The Communist Manifesto is an extension of Karl Marx's private life. They probably took his lazy butt out of the wheel. He said, okay, I got to get to that money. I don't want to work. I want to stay in the coffee houses, the libraries, and write some. I got to get to the money. How can I get that money?
Right on. And then the dictators there and go, thank you. What was that? Sort of the useful fool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karl. You gave me a facade that I can tell people, rise up together, people. And then he slaughters the very people that rose up, sends them to Siberia, and says, you ever notice this, you guys? Where does the head of China live? I bet you in a palace a little bit bigger than any of you.
Yeah.
Right? Where's Putin live? Did you know he took over all the properties around his property on the Black Sea, his beach house? Now it's not a beach house. He owns the whole lake.
Jeez.
So these are all dictators. Rocket Man, I'll leave it with him, right? Rocket Man lives in gold adorned palace, and all these people have yachts in the Mediterranean. That doesn't, Michael or Aaron, here look like communism the way Karl Marx said. These people aren't wearing rags, right? They're opulent dictators while the others pay for it.
Yeah.
I appreciate this dialogue because you're all helping me write my script for the time travel. I'm gonna send Marx and Douglass on when they go to Venezuela and North Korea. I can see Douglass looking at Karl Marx. You see what you gave us? You see this mess? You proud of this? Come on, man. So thank you guys. I got this script written now. I got it written.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, so we're just about at the half-hour mark here. I just wanted to give those watching online and or listening, if they have a comment or have a question for K. Karl, any of us, just throw it in the chat if you're on YouTube or on the chat on X, and I'm monitoring that. But if we don't have anything, I know, Chris, you have somewhere to be in about 5 minutes or so. So if we don't have any questions, maybe we can wrap this up. I think this was great today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can kick off the wrap up. You know, when one, you look at Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass, there couldn't be a bigger contrast between force versus freedom, right? Freedom is something that's given to us from God. And Frederick Douglass knew that. The founders of this country knew that. They built a whole government around the notion of liberty. And so God bless you, K. Karl, for writing this book, because I think it's going to expose to the world, especially those young people, the difference between these two forms of government. Because most people that are standing with their fists strong and advocating for Marxism and all the things that represents, they don't know anything about it. They don't know anything about it.
And I had this comment, and now that you have it, Chris, I know what my critics gonna say already. I know it. They're gonna say something like, K. Karl, your book oversimplifies the debate into good and evil. Is that fair? My response is it's accurate.
Exactly.
Because freedom versus tyranny, it's not a small difference.
No.
I would just say in closing, everybody watching the show, and I know we've gotten started, we're building an audience slowly, carefully, and that's fine. We committed to do something on this show, the Liberty Collaborative, which was to give more content than the mainstream media does, more context and historical perspective. And I can't think of anything more relevant now with this guy Mondami running, AOC running around the country, that you are the right man at the right time at the right place. And I would urge everyone watching this show to get K. Karl's book, talk to other people, explore Frederick Douglass, and get this message out. When people say, how does freedom win? How do we succeed? Notice I'm not saying political party. I'm talking, how do the principles prevail? They prevail, learn the truth, and then share the truth, because this is the truth. If you, wherever you're listening around the country, go to people and say, well, here's what Frederick Douglass said. What did Marx say? And why? What's so good about this thing? So, K. Karl, you really stimulate something. I hope people get your book, and I hope like heck they get you on TV shows and interviews talking about this right in the middle of this New York election, because you're the man of the hour with this stuff. So thanks a million.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just got 2 points really to wrap up here. First of all, I've been reading what you sent, and it's really good, K. Karl. Second, I wear my Frederick Douglass shirt around town, and when we had our vigil for Charlie, I walked in the state trooper's office, the resident trooper, and he was looking at my shirt, and I didn't know he was a history guy. And so we started talking history, and he goes, I never thought of Douglass with a liberty message. I said, well, I got a book for you. So I brought a copy of your book and the insert, and I dropped it off so he could read it. But with a book like this, talking that it's geared towards younger students and up, or individuals, that it needs to be in the schools. It should be part of the curriculum, because like Douglass said, it's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. And getting this message in there, it's not right or left. It's not, they can't keep it out for, the whole separation of church and state type thing. It's values. And this is what this one individual said versus the Marxism, the other set of values. And I think it's important to get that into the schools. So parents, buy a copy, bring it to your board of ed, and tell them they want this part of the curriculum. Any final words there, K. Karl, before we sign off?
Yeah, one last thing, and I will say that I think I want people to read the book, but if you feel that it's totally anti what you believe in, well, you need to read it anyway, because maybe you'll be transformed like I was. I was on the other side. Another thing is this: a lot of people say all the time, I'm using Frederick Douglass for political as a political tool. Well, Douglass is not my tool. Douglass is my teacher.
There you go.
And
Absolutely.
I'm not using him. I'm learning from him. And my book shares this message of liberty, and I want to share with others. That's what it's all about.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And we are going to be back next Thursday. So make sure you turn in here to the Liberty Collaborative on YouTube or on X. Thank you, gentlemen. And I will see you all next Thursday.
I got that script written about that time travel now.
Boy. Aaron, are you playing Michael's song on the way out? We just can't hear it.